Today's online session, what NGOs really need in the fight against the plastic flood, is our second session of our polyproblem online session series. And we have two very special guests for today. Cordie Aziz, founder and CEO of Environment 360, and her colleague Marcin Kafui Kurateng, Senior Programs Officer at Environment 360. The whole online series is based on our latest report, The Waste of the Others, which focuses around the challenges and solutions around the establishment of waste management systems in countries of the Global South. If you want to learn more about the initiative Polyproblem and our activities, please visit our website, polyproblem.org, and sign up for the newsletter. My colleague Anne is just posting the link to the newsletter on the chat. Let's have a look at today's agenda. So we'll have a short input from our two experts, Cordie Aziz and Marcin Kafui Kurateng from Environment 360, and learn more about their activities across Ghana. Then you have the opportunity to ask questions about the input, and after that we move onwards to 3 interesting breakout sessions where you have the opportunity to discuss a certain question, a certain topic with our experts and the polyproblem team in smaller groups. And after that, we all come back to the large virtual workshop room where we discuss the findings and highlights of each of the breakout sessions and have a discussion on them with Cordie and Marcin Kafui. After that, we'll have a wrap up and outlook on the next webinar in September, and the online seminar ends depending on where you're at the moment. So German local time or European local time at 5:30. Environment 360 is one of the leading organizations for reducing plastic waste in Ghana. They support and strengthen the informal waste sector and work with over 500 people across the cities of Accra, Tema, and Kumasi, and plan to further expand regionally. Cordie Aziz is the founder and managing director of Environment 360. She is passionate about creating clean communities by leveraging the informal workforce and the strength of the community. Her passion led her to create the first successful plastic collection scheme for communities in Ghana. Before starting Environment 360, she worked for the United States Congress on the Committee on Homeland Security. She also served as the Public Relations Director for the NGOs, the largest apprenticeship training program in the United States. She holds a bachelor's degree in mass communications from Jackson State University and a master's degree in public administration from Bowie State University, both located in the United States. Marcin Kafui Kurateng is the Senior Programs Officer at Environment 360. He is an environmental scientist with 7 years of experience consulting on environment and sanitation related projects, including soil and water remediation, remote sensing, and geographical information systems, and has also experience with environmental policy and strategy development projects. He has supervised environmental impact assessment projects with both small and large formal and informal teams for private equity. And over the last 2 years at Environment 360, Marcin Kafui managed the PICKET project, a pioneer community behavioral change, waste segregation and plastic recycling project in Tema, Newtown, funded by the Danone Ecosystem Fund and Fernmill Ghana Limited. Please, Cordie and Marcin Kafui, the floor is yours.
Great, so thank you so much for having us and allowing us to be here. for this particular presentation. We are very much excited to speak with everyone and then discuss some of the issues here on how we can actually work together more collaboratively. We just want to start by giving a small presentation on who Environment 360 is. I think it was very well presented by the host, Julia. So we will just go into a little bit more information. Environment 360 was actually founded by myself, as she mentioned, and it looks like my presentation is not fully, there it goes. Okay. So Environment 360, our whole premise is actually to make Ghana green. Just a little bit of history on Environment 360. It was founded in 2014. In 2015, we launched Evolve, which, as mentioned, was the first successful community collection scheme for plastics. We started off using community containers around vantage points, and then since then we have moved into supporting corporates and other entities implement recycling programs, as well as we have a variety of school programs under Evolve as well. Due to our success in the recycling sector in 2016, Accra Metropolitan Assembly named Environment 360 the recycling coordinator, which essentially allowed us to be able to collect plastics throughout the city without being restricted to one particular area, such as many waste contractors are. In 2017, we started Picket, and Picket, as mentioned, is a collaboration between Fan Milk, Environment 360, MIT, and WeGo, mainly financed by the Danone Ecosystem Fund. And what it did is it sought to create the first waste picker-led sorting center. We've learned some interesting lessons from that with working from the informal sector. And that also opened up the gate for us to start working with GIZ in 2019, in which we've done projects in both Kumasi and Accra to better help organize the informal sector plastic waste collectors into formalization of their particular jobs. A little bit about Environment 360's funding, because I do think it's important because, of course, NGOs have to be able to raise funds. The majority of our funds do come from donor funds. However, we do have 25% in memberships. When we say memberships, this mainly applies to people that decide to have Environment 360 support their recycling programs through the creation and implementation. But even recently, Environment 360 has spearheaded an organization of other plastic collectors where we can essentially work together with them to address issues across the industry that impact everyone in the recycling sector, be it collection or the actual processing of materials. And then 10% of our funds actually comes from the materials that we collect, which are mainly paper and plastic. The money from the recycling sales mainly goes back into our school programming, and that is how we sustain our school programming. Of course, I have a cheap plug for myself. I don't think I have to go into it again because most of it was in our presentation. But I want to stress on the reason Environment 360 focuses on the informal sector is because we really believe that with a high unemployment rate and a large rising population, that waste is still one of the biggest opportunities to create jobs and have an impact on society. So we think that it is critical to really be working with people in the informal sector so that they can, of course, have better economic ties, but also be able to have an impact within their communities. Environment 360, our work has 3 separate pillars: community, sustainability, and cooperation. These are going to be at the core of everything that we do. So we always want to be able to work with the community to help develop the programs. We want to be able to employ people within the community that we are working in. We also want whatever programs we create to be owned by the community for sustainability. So we don't want it to be thought of as a project by private companies or donor agencies. We want it to be something that the community can own and hold near to them and take onto them for a longer possibility. And we believe in cooperation. And that means that we don't think it is one person that can do it. And I think we will talk a little bit later about this when we look at how can we have more collaboration between international organizations and local NGOs and other development partners so that we can actually create these sustainable solutions. When you look at some of the impact, we actually have collected more than 500 tons of recyclables. In general, I think this number is probably more than 700 at this particular point. We work with over 500 informal sector waste workers across different programs. We've been able to educate 10,000 children in various areas. And currently we've created 10 jobs for youth in Ghana. So this is everybody from our program internal staff to our logistics team as well. One of the things that we really focus on is trying to develop cooperatives. So I think that this is something as well that we can touch on a little bit more, or if you want to know about lessons learned, we can discuss a little later. One of the major accomplishments of Environment 360 is the launch of the first PET buyback center. Last year in September, through the support of GIZ, we were able to launch a buyback center for plastics. During this project, we actually tested a variety of models. What you see here is actually a stationary model that is used for on private property. We also developed another collection model with cheaper infrastructure in Old Fadama, and we developed a mobile collection as well for those areas that did not have space. From the picture, as you can see, most of the people we work with are women. And this is just because we think that there's a greater economic impact in supporting women to ensure that they have the resources they need to be able to push their family forward out of poverty. When you look at the general thing that we share, we pretty much hit all of the UND SDGs. So we work to do no poverty, good health, clean water and sanitation. And that, I think, is the beauty of these projects and Environment 360, is that when you do have the right partners and the right support on ground, and you can leverage local expertise, you really can impact and start to affect change in a variety of communities. So when you look at the gamut of everything, I think that Environment 360, along with the partners that we've worked with, have really shown that there really can be a change in an ecosystem. One thing I would like to point out is that Environment 360, when we actually started Evolve 5 years ago, we were actually the only people really into the collection of PET. Now, through our membership of the Plastic Aggregators Association, you'll see that there's actually 18 different people. So it really goes to show that there really can be a very rapid effect of impact, and there can be a lot of growth in this particular industry that can continue to employ more people and create more opportunity. And then, of course, if you have further questions that maybe you won't get an opportunity to ask now, or maybe they aren't on this particular topic and you'd like to reach out, please feel free to do so. I'm just looking at this. I think I have to make one small adjustment. My email address has changed. It is now can, C-A-N, at environment360gh.org, but all of the other information is correct. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to continuing to speak with you throughout the afternoon.
Thank you very much, Cordie. The floor is open now for questions. Please post them first on the chat, and my colleague Uwe will address them.
while we are waiting for more questions, maybe I can also explain a little bit more about the model that we use to work with the informal sector. Our model with the informal sector is one where we actually try to empower them to actually be able to own their businesses. So the idea is to be able to allow them to come together in groups where they actually create micro collection networks that then service certain areas. Typically, Environment 360 will provide a variety of business training and capacity development. We also create partnerships with private sector that lead to the establishment of formalization. So for instance, we recently just launched a partnership with Fidelity Bank to help move our waste pickers into formal banking, which we hope will be a little bit more impactful for them. We also work with recyclers to negotiate better prices for them. And currently we're working on building out a local transportation network for the transportation of plastics. So for instance, in Kumasi, where there isn't a lot of PET recycling, we've been able to gain the support of Qualiplast, a recycling company, as well as Miniplast, where they actually bring down the plastics from Kumasi into Accra.
Okay, we have got a first question here and a second one as well. One question is, Cordie, how can one become a member of Environment 360? You've been talking about three kinds of funding. I remember the first was donation, the second was the earnings from the recycling, and the third one was membership. What is it about with the membership?
Membership are those people that want to support Environment 360, but also want to have a recycling program. So in turn, what we do is we allow you to become a member of Environment 360, and then we will actually create your recycling program. So membership typically consists of paying a fee, anywhere from maybe $100 up to maybe $5,000, depending on the size of your organization and the type of services that you want for your recycling. Then what happens is that money is used to actually cover logistics, transportation, and other things, so that when we sell the recyclables, it's actually 100% profit. If you're looking more on the association side, to become a member, you basically need to be an informal or formal waste collector or processor that has been in business for a minimum of 2 years. Then what will happen is you actually pay your fees to a general account, and then that money is used to help support capacity building and other training programs for the said members within. But the issue of our industry membership is really to, once again, also help formalize some of the other informal collectors and aggregators that are out there, so that it can become more of a voice, so that it's not overlooked as an activity.
Okay. Mario has got another question in a similar direction. Has your funding scheme changed over the past years? So maybe the part that comes from the recycling earnings is increasing, or the memberships fees are increasing. How did it change over the last years?
So Environment 360 is a little bit different. We were actually sustainable before we actually started getting projects. So if you notice, Environment 360 actually didn't get for its first project until 2017, but it's been in operation since 2014. And a large part of that is fueled by our recycling side, evolve. And once again, we've been fortunate, I think, to come in at a time where a lot of companies have a greater interest in becoming sustainable. So our membership has done really well. As far as expansion on this side, I think that particularly due to COVID, we will be putting a little bit more attention into our collection side of things and continuing to expand our memberships, just to create more of a local basis. Something to be said about our projects, because I don't want to jump ahead, but something I think to be said about our projects as well is that most of our projects seek to be sustainable within the community. So you'll notice with the GIZ project, both in Kumasi and Accra, during the duration of the project, we were actually able to raise enough capital to keep those particular projects going. So the funding that was received in September of 2017 has actually been rolled over and is still doing PET purchasing in Kumasi currently. It's the same as well with the Accra project, is that the funds received from last year's project are still rolling into 2020 to continue purchasing the plastic as well.
Could you imagine that your business model would be successful, or could you imagine that in sometimes Environment 360 could work without any donor grants?
I think the goal is always to be sustainable and work without donor grants. I tell organizations often, I think that if you're looking for donor grants, then and this is the only way you're going to survive, I think it'll be very difficult to survive. We know that a lot of times funding just isn't available at this particular time. And it's also one of these things where if you're looking at expansion, you'll never really get the money that you need for expansion. I think that we will always run programs. So do I think that we will always find ways to ensure that we're recruiting new waste pickers, that we also are giving them the capacity and business development they need, that we are continuing to be players and helping people build out these local transportation networks and helping them unite at one voice. I think that yes, we'll do that. But I also think that because we are creating tangible jobs, funding for that is a lot more accessible than funding for running Environment 360 and employing its staff. So I think it's a balance of how you actually do your business model. And one thing I will say is that I think as we progress, the business model of Environment 360 is definitely changing. I think at one point in time, we had a very employee-heavy organization, and now we are looking at how can we contract out things so that we don't have the burden of paying these additional costs, which are very hard to fund under grants sometimes.
Okay. Cordie, before I ask the next question, a very interesting one, I think I would suggest that you turn your video on right now, because maybe some people here might be curious to see you as well. I think it's okay. Great, thanks. Well, the next question from Dorothy is a very interesting one. As I said before, what kind of plastics are you dealing with? You mentioned PET, but as we all know, PET is not the most problematic material because it's easy to recycle and easy to sell, and you can raise good prices for PET. But what about LDPE or other more problematic materials?
So it's a very interesting question. Here in Ghana, you will find that HDPE, high density plastic, hard plastic, or PP, polypropylene, actually has a very good market. So it's actually really easy to sell these things on the market, and they have a really good price. So Environment 360 does deal in that. We do deal in some flexible packaging. Mainly though, our flexible packaging here is still mainly HDPE, it's water sachet, but there are some that are LDPE, which also sort of have a market. What's more challenging is going to be your packaging, sort of your flexible packaging that you get from food. We have struggled to really find a local network that can really take this. There are a few people on ground, however, they are restricted by the number of contracts they get. Typically, it's used here to do blocks for buildings and other things. So they become very restricted in what they can actually do because, of course, it's directly connected to how many contracts they get for that particular brick. One thing that we also like to do at Environment 360 is, as you mentioned, some of these things have a very easy market abroad. Environment 360 is really more interested in building out a local ecosystem. And this is because we want to have a ripple effect. So we want to be able to close the loop locally. And I think when you look at circular economy, that's really what it's all about. It's not about us collecting and being able to sell in Europe or Indonesia or China. It's really about how can we collect this material and then enable other people along the chain to actually participate in this process so that we can create more jobs while also having an economic and environmental impact.
Thanks. We've got a few more questions right now. One comes from our friend Julia. She just asked if the waste picking. You've been talking about waste as an opportunity at the beginning of your presentation, and Julia is asking if waste picking really is an opportunity when we look at the long term as a profession, or is it, or would it be a better way to give people more education and to start an own profession or another career?
You know, I think that this is
in terms of people to keep them inside the informal waste sector.
You know, I think that this is a great question. I do think that waste is going to be one of the largest employers undoubtedly in Africa. Once again, waste is created every day. It's not going anywhere. So undoubtedly it will be a huge employment sector. I think the key is how do you move waste pickers or informal sector plastic waste collectors into formalization? And that is a little bit trickier. We've had several experiences where really what we've realized is that in the perfect environment, probably most of these pickers just want to be hired and their skill set utilized. So they aren't necessarily in being an entrepreneur. You sort of have two sets of waste pickers. You have those that are entrepreneurial. They really see it as a job. They enjoy what they do. They want to expand their collection networks. They just need access to loan and infrastructure to support them. And then you have those that, I mean, they sort of do it as a side thing. If somebody would employ them to do it full time on a regular salary where they didn't have to worry about fluctuations, they also would happily do it. So I think the challenging thing is how do you actually come up with that model that really takes them from this informal sector into this formal sector. And I think that that's something that we haven't quite figured out. I'm not going to say that we have all of the answers to it. I think it's a complete learning process, but I think that these are some of the lessons that you can learn from each other when you bring expertise and when you bring knowledge from different places and different sectors to sort of solve these issues.
Okay. We've got some more questions, but we can ask Cordie only one more because we have to go into the breakout sessions, which will be the next slot of our online seminar. But to all those who posted more questions, we make sure that they are not lost. We will have another plenary discussion later in the webinar. Then we can ask the questions that are now in the chat. So don't worry that your questions will get lost. Well, one last one, Cordie, maybe you can shortly give us some information about the COVID situation in Ghana and how it affected your work. But yeah. Please try to do it very briefly.
Yeah. So I think COVID impacted everyone. Here in Ghana, I think for the recycling industry, it was particularly crippling. And that's because government of Ghana didn't see it as an essential services. So though waste management was essential, recycling wasn't essential. So you literally had companies that couldn't operate for 4 to 6 weeks. It's also had an impact because the market prices have dropped undoubtedly because, I mean, petrol is cheap. It's just cheaper to buy virgin material. And even our local buyers that do export, their markets are also at a halt. So this means that the price has come down, which means that it's not as desirable for some waste pickers to continue picking. So we have also seen a drop in the number of pickers that are interested due to the decrease in the price. So I think undoubtedly it has had an impact, and we're not quite sure what's on the horizon or how we're going to turn that around at this particular moment.
We will now move to the breakout sessions. I will briefly share them with you one more time. Please choose your respective breakout room session. In room number 1, we will discuss needs and expectations. In room number 1, we will talk about knowledge sharing. And in room number 3, we will talk about scaling and scalability. Welcome back to the large virtual workshop room. I hope you've enjoyed your breakout sessions. We for sure didn't have enough time to discuss all the points. I would like to hand over. So the idea now is that each breakout room shares the most interesting findings and discussion points and highlights, and then we move on to an open discussion. And for that, if you have questions or additional contributions you want to make to one of the results, please post them on the chat, and then Uwe will make sure that they're going to be addressed during the discussion. I would like to start with breakout session number 3. Who is going to present the main findings from your group N?
This is Dorothy. She took the notes. And
perfect.
Yes, she's presenting.
Great, Dorothy. Yeah, the floor is yours. Maybe you can turn on your video if you want to. You don't have to, that's all right.
It's fine. It's fine, I can. Oh, wait a second. I just have to prep myself. I know what you say. Hi. Yes, so maybe to just quickly discuss what we talked about. Actually, I think the main thing that we found out is that 20 minutes is way too little, way too short. So we tried to talk about, or our question was, how can successful pilot projects become sustainable and scalable? I think that's a question we all ask ourselves. So there is not really a solution that we found, but the takeaways, or the main takeaways from the discussions, were that especially in recycling or recycling plastics, the instability of market prices is an issue. So you definitely need someone to fund in the start, but then you need reliable and long-term partners to pay a fair and stable price of the material. So only with this you can, finance yourself and become sustainable as a business. One point that I also like personally is that you should definitely include locals. You should not force something onto people, but raise awareness and get them included into your project. And also nowadays IT is one of the major points for transparency and for, to ensure that everything is going correctly, that there is no, how to call it, like, so in the waste picking part, if you go from informal to formal to transfer and change the business models or the market itself. And the third takeaway was the potential of replication, so that you start small, but then you see whether you can replicate your model within the country in a different city or even outside the same country. But we couldn't get into details on that part. And there are some controversies in the part of social versus economical. We heard that before from Cordie, that especially in plastics, the price drop now through COVID-19 is an issue that I myself know too, that now virgin material is cheaper than the recycled material. So that's a problem that we don't know how to deal with for now. And it was particularly helpful, one comment that said that the final product must finance the complete business to become sustainable. So you really have to find something that is worth of the labor and worth of the material that you work with.
Thank you very much for that summary. Cordie and Masen Kafui, do you have any immediate reactions to the results from breakout session number 3? Or anyone else who would like to add something to what Dorothy just said?
So I think for me, I think that the group hit on a lot of challenges and lessons that Environment 360 has learned as well. particularly when it comes to being able to finance an entire project for its sustainability. You do get a lot of people that want to finance one particular piece or finance half a project and then find other funding later on. And we found that that has been challenging for our market at least.
Thank you. If there aren't any additional comments or reactions at this point, I would like to move on to breakout room number 2. And who is gonna present? Julia.
That's Julia, right?
Perfect.
So we discussed the question of how expertise from different continents better be leveraged and matched with local projects. And in the first step, we assessed that it definitely is important to get a community in place rather than just a network in order to successfully foster sustainable projects and collaborations. We also discussed that we need to establish partnerships that have the culture of the people in mind, that this is crucial in order to be able to even partner up with anybody across continents. We had a nice example from Achim Becker, who said that while COVID-19 definitely slowed down the project, he was actually able to work on a concept, a strategy paper, so to speak, and had the idea to invite his fellow network colleagues to discuss and give feedback on this concept in a closed LinkedIn group, which led us to the question of, do we really need more communication platforms in this day and age? So we had this discussion about communication being accessible already, information being there in a flood, it not being easily understandable. And our main results or takeaways would probably be that we preferred, or we would opt for, establishing a community platform in some sense. We feel that exchanging knowledge within the network, especially giving feedback and asking questions, is something that is crucial and that can actually foster and drive ideas. And we also said that it's important to just get to people where they already are anyway. So yeah, platforms like LinkedIn or Slack would maybe be useful for that. Maybe the only controversy we had was that there already is to some extent information and communication overload, which we need to tackle in a useful way. And also that understandable information on a larger scale amongst or across continents is something that is still an open question and probably not that easily achievable, and maybe also something we don't need to achieve in that sense. What was most surprising probably is that there's still a need for better and more open communication, especially in this day and age where we have this easy access to information, and that it is up to us to actually be as brave to ask these questions on the platforms we are, and to actually access our network for that in order to build a community. And if anybody from my group has something I haven't said, I would be happy if they would just add to it.
Thank you, Julia. Are there any immediate reactions to these interesting takeaways and ideas? Maybe starting with Cordie or Masen Kafui.
Well, I think Julia highlighted essentially the conversation that was had in the group, but what I would just like to add or just point out was more towards information. It seems that the whole idea was how to make information relevant to the local context in the space of whether cultural or legal issues, because ensuring that projects were implemented successfully, we needed to make sure that the information that you get across the globe from other experts that you would want to adopt was right or was appropriate. And so I think that a very fantastic suggestion was how to even leverage LinkedIn. And one member of the group mentioned how she was trying to get information and she focused more on Google, but then it just occurred to her that LinkedIn is also an avenue to sort of get information that you can adopt for your project's implementation.
Thank you very much for this contribution. anyone else who would like to add something or has an idea that just popped up? If not, we will move on to breakout session number 1. I'm gonna try to summarize our discussion, and maybe Cordie or one of the other participants can chip in case I've forgotten anything. So I think, and that's been already mentioned, I think in group 2, keeping the local culture in mind is very crucial when working with development collaboration. So what we discussed was, what do local actors expect from successful development cooperations? And I think one of the first things that came up was that the development cooperations really need to keep the local culture in mind when trying to design a project together with local partners. And then the second one was that many of the local initiatives start as volunteering activities or volunteer-based organizations. And then it is important that the development organizations support the transition from a purely volunteer-based organization towards an employee-based or partially volunteer, partially employee-based organization. And this is something that has been lacking so far. And the last point we've discussed was the overall power dynamics or power imbalance between local organizations and international development organizations, which of course is also a controversy in many different ways. Cordie, would you like to add something to that? I think you're muted, Cordie.
Sorry about that. I think that you did a very good job capturing everything. I think one of the key things also that we were able to touch on is how to support organizations in their professionalism growth. So that maybe even if they aren't there when you find them or when you partner with them over a period of time, you're able to better support what they need to sort of come into the organization that you need to work with.
Do we have any other experience in the room when it comes to working with international development organizations and things they have experienced and wish the experience had been different? Not for now. So what we now like to do is to maybe come back to the question that we didn't answer during the first answering question and Q&A part. Uwe, do you want to go ahead and have another look at them again?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Julia. There are some more interesting questions for Cordie and for Mazen Kafui. One of them is the question about the amount of the collected waste. How did it increase? In what time span did it increase? And where are you standing now compared to the beginning in terms of just the sheer amount of the waste? Cordie, you're still muted. Just please unmute.
Sorry, this has been a very interesting phenomenon. Environment 360, when we started out, it was actually a lot easier to collect plastic because we were the only one. I think now what has happened is that Accra is really oversaturated. So it used to be very easy, I mean, to collect maybe 5-10 tons in a week. It wasn't that big of a deal. Now we find that we do have to put in more time and energy to hit a minimum of 20 to 30 tons per month. A large part of that is just because, as I mentioned, when Environment 360 first started, we were the only one. And now we've identified at least 17 other people that literally do the same thing that we do. I think part of our mitigation strategy is that we've been able to look at other areas that maybe people aren't as interested in. And I think that we do the hard work for the foundation to allow other people to come in. Because we know that in Ghana, there is an excess of only 2% of our plastic is recycled. So, I mean, there's more than enough room for everyone. So you'll find now that we look at our areas such as Kumasi and other smaller areas where there aren't as many players, and then mobilize plastic from those particular areas, since more focus and attention has been given to Accra by those in the same business.
Thanks. The next question is, well, let's go just a step further from the collection to the recycling. Do you work with recyclers who are doing different kinds of recycling in terms of mechanical recycling versus chemical recycling, or is it just the classical mechanical recycling?
So it depends. So as mentioned, our market isn't that formed out. You do have several industries that process here locally. It is basically more of a mechanical type, more so than chemical. They take from one product into another. However, we do have some also that are just baling it and sending it abroad, or chipping it and sending it abroad. And this is why COVID-19, I think, really hit the industry very difficult. So it will be interesting to see how people are actually going to re-strategize those local recyclers to see how they can build more local capacity as well. But I will say that probably out of all the recyclers we deal with, probably 20% actually do a full product locally, and the other 80% actually are dependent on a foreign market.
And are there any kind of upcycling or reusing items, or is everything going to be recycled in a classical way, shredded and
Another good question. I tell people, I think circularity has been going on in developing countries before circularity was a thought or theory. I think that when you come to countries like Ghana, and I think you'll see this in other developing countries like India and other places in Indonesia, we typically always reuse something until it can't be reused again. So I think that you see a variety of very creative ventures coming up that are doing different things with upcycling. Pallets now are like amazing when you see the number of people doing pallet furniture and other things, when you see the number of people making waste bins and other things from other reusable materials. You see so much. It's even hit into fashion now. So I think that there continues to be a trend. In that, I do think that, of course, now with more interest in being upcycling, it's not as taboo. So hopefully that'll continue to spur interest in the particular area and be able to continue to help it grow.
Great, thank you. One last question by myself. We meant just a couple of minutes ago, Dorothy mentioned the issue that virgin material is much cheaper at the moment compared to recycled material. Are you in touch with your government in order to maybe prepare some administrational intervention on the market, like regulations, taxes, or something like that?
I think this is why we've created this association of everyone, of aggregators and recyclers. in the industry. I think what we realize is that there are certain things, yes, we all do our own individual business and we all have our own concerns, but there are certain things that just impact all of us. And government regulation is one of those things. Like you said, there does have to be some level of tax relief. Now you're charged a 3% service tax whenever you're recycling anything, and it's over 2,000 Ghana cedis worth of goods. So this needs to be looked at and revised. We also need to look at and revise. They do a tax stamp on the top of lids of PET, which makes it very hard to recycle and brings down the potential in that particular thing. And we're also looking at standardizing the price of certain materials as an association. So therefore, everyone can sort of be able to see some profit and to see something. So this is mainly the goal of the association as we grow it out, but it's to help address some of those things.
Do you also work with the idea of waste separation and education and raise awareness in terms of the topic, and how do you organize your education work in general?
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial. Typically, we actually focus in on schools. We've had tremendous success in schools getting them to segregate waste through using various incentive and support programs. We do some community incentive. One of the learning lessons, though, we've learned is that essentially communities, particularly those communities that really need it, you're going to have some sort of incentive for them. So they're not willing to segregate their waste for free and give it out to someone for free. So you do have to be creative in how you actually are able to get them to segregate waste and then get someone to pick that up. So this is just one of the learning lessons we've learned, and hopefully we'll be able to learn more about this as we embark on our next community education campaign slated in September in Kumasi.
Okay, there is from and he wants to know if you're in touch or in a cooperation with a large chemical industry players like BASF or Dow or DuPont, how they are called, or if you're just working with your local recycling industry.
So Dow was actually really instrumental in Ghana. I would say Dow is actually one of these corporate partners. I mean, Dow is a fabulous corporate partner. They're really committed to the cause. They're really committed to supporting local solutions, and they're really committed to local ownership. So I think Dow is very quiet about what they do in the market and what they do to support. But I would say that Dow definitely is a major supporter. A lot of people have enjoyed the support of Dow, including Environment 360. And they probably can provide other people that are interested in working with local partners maybe a great template on how to do that and be successful.
Thank you very much, Cordie. I think we haven't got the time to answer more questions. So I will give back to Julia, but before I do this, I would like to recommend that you still have an eye on the chat, because there are some participants posting interesting things like their own concepts and so on. Okay, then Julia.
Thank you so much, Uwe. Unfortunately, we are almost at the end of our session today. Thank you so much, Cordie and Masen Kafui, for your great insights, and thank you so much to all of you for your interesting contributions during the discussion in the larger group, but also in the breakout sessions. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to continue the discussions in the Slack channel.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, goodbye.
Bye.